possible is it for Kenya to have like a nuclear bomb?
Bomb?
Yeah.
You went
I just had to go for it.
You just had to go to bomb. Nuclear bomb is actually not a very ethical application of nuclear science, if I put it like that. So if it exists or if it ends up existing, it will not be by ethical practices. It will probably be some underground people working on some underground thing, really. But that also depends with there being a nuclear plant, because some of the waste material that comes from nuclear power plants is actually what can be enriched to make a bomb.
You're not going to mention names.
Yes.
But just be a new.
Yes.
There are certain big brands that we know that are breaching the regulations in terms of what should be used in cosmetics or beauty products.
I can't really go into detail on that. I just remembered. However, this is what I will say. But I will say, like, the ones that you think
that
might be safe
or the best
are actually
the worst.
Not really the worst. I can't really say the worst, but like they have certain level of heavy metal concentration. And then the ones that I'm like, okay, I know this one is going to have something. Then I go and test it. I'm like, this is fair.
There is an index you mentioned where there is a certain limit of where these metals are allowed, right?
Yeah.
What if they're non-existent?
Some heavy metals are permitted only for a certain, for example, use. It's not like all heavy metals are bad, basically. Chromium, for example, you could say it's a colorant. Like, for example, nail polishes could have chromium. Like the chrome color is basically chromium.
What causes the glittery effect on the nail polishes?
It's chromium actually, but it's a different compound of chromium, which is chromium 3, which is a safer compound than chromium 5, which is now the carcinogenic.
Welcome, beautiful people. Karibuni to the Laughing Lab Coat. As usual, I'm your host, Dr. Mahideen Mohammed. This is an episode which is going to kind of get a little bit nervous and excited at the same time, because we've never had a nuclear engineer before. Today's guest is Camila Okongo, a nuclear engineer, physicist. Which one would be the right Nini?
I am a physicist, but let's just say scientist.
Nuclear scientist.
Yes, nuclear scientist.
Basically, if you've watched Big Bang Theory, the career paths that you see there is basically the path she chose. And karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
And we're honored to have you.
Thank you for having me.
I think it was necessary. I don't think there are many Kenyans who are into nuclear science that much.
Yeah, there are not so many of us, actually.
Average number?
Average number, we are in the 100s, 100 and something, less than 200, if I'm not wrong, really, of people who've probably graduated and completed all the way. Yes, it's not so much of a big number of, especially Kenyans who decided to practice and stay and practice in Kenya. There are not so many of us, actually.
Oh, and considering it's not is it a well-known or?
Not at all. I didn't even know it by the time I was leaving undergraduate.
Yeah.
So it came way later. I didn't even know about it. It just happened to me by chance. Somebody mentioned it to me and I was like, let me see what this is about. I entered into it with a lot of curiosity, like finding out, okay, so what is this? I have no idea what this is. Let's just go find out.
Yeah.
So I also didn't know about it by the time I was entering it. So I will also imagine that so many people also don't know about it currently. Because even the Institute of Nuclear Science is in the University of Nairobi, it's very hidden. It's not so out there. So you wouldn't even tell it exists.
Is there a reason why it's not made as popular?
I think academicians probably want to keep to themselves. You could say probably that's the reason. I can't say that that's the full reason. But also the nature of the research that happens there. A lot of people usually just like to research in, not really isolation, but just like in groups, but not so much of like large groups and stuff. And it's that kind of thing that you enter once you have like a genuine, not really a genuine interest, but just like a curiosity, if I put it like that, to find out exactly what this is about. That's when now people probably, even like in our university, we are also in the faculty of engineering. So sometimes you could find like the undergraduate students, maybe like once, that's when you'll find like some undergraduate student coming to find out like, okay, so what exactly happens here? This is just a lab, this is a building that is on its own. So maybe just like once or twice, you'll probably find undergraduate students coming to find out like what goes on here. Like, okay, so this is a lab. Okay, let's see what happens here. So yeah, it's not so known.
Okay. Being a nuclear scientist, I obviously have to ask you this question. And how possible is it for Kenya to have like a nuclear bomb?
Bomb.
Yeah.
You went right.
I just had to go for like,
You just had to go to bomb. Nuclear bomb is actually not a very ethical application of nuclear science, if I put it like that. So if it exists or if it ends up existing, it will not be by ethical practices. It will probably be some underground people working on some underground thing, really. But that also depends with there being a nuclear plant, because some of the waste material that comes from nuclear power plants is actually what can be enriched to make a bomb, if I put it like that. So,
interesting.
yeah.
And considering nuclear energy is currently being used in the medical field, I think we before we started the podcasts, we had like a small conversation.
Yes.
You told me it's currently being used in radiotherapy machines, I think.
Yeah.
CT scans,
CT scans.
MRIs. Is there any new technology you'd personally look at and say this is the next big thing in the medical field that would be a breakthrough?
Okay. In terms of the medical field, I'm sure there are research that happens currently in the medical field. I feel like right now the medical field is also going the direction of like fusing AI or machine learning models with the data that is gotten from some of these medical machines, if I put it like that. So I feel like the future that a lot of machines are going into is incorporating a lot of machine learning, AI, deep learning into whatever is already existing. So most like just making things better. What is already there, just making it better.
And is there a threat? And does the department appreciate the aspect of artificial intelligence coming into the nuclear field?
I can say to a fair amount, yes, because there are so many people currently that have received funding to carry out research, for example, for their PhD thesis. And then as a result of that, they also get master's students under them to be able to help them work on like the same goal. So I can say it's something that is emerging and it's more or less like very sensational right now.
Yeah.
So there's a good level of interest, a good level of curiosity out there right now about that.
Wow. And coming to the main, let's say, inspiration behind your thesis, what was the biggest factor that you looked at and you said, I'm going to make a study on assessing cancer risks on beauty products, cosmetics, makeup. What was the inspiration?
The inspiration behind my thesis actually have several of them. The first inspo was just a level of curiosity again, just asking a question of like, how safe are, for example, the products I used myself, and also getting a lot of info from people about like them getting reactions from products they use and all that. So just like, because naturally I'm the kind of person who I'll go and Google and go into a rabbit hole and look and look and look. So naturally it just led me down a rabbit hole, and I was just like, instead of just me using my knowledge, my curiosity, just going down rabbit holes on Google, what can I do about it? So that I didn't like want to position myself as like the expert or something like that sort. So just like a human wanting to know or ask questions, what exactly is in this product, and also because there's a huge counterfeiting issue. Another now brings me to my second inspo. I was seeing a lot of campaigns, for example, on TikTok or something of that sort, or other social media channels talking about how to differentiate genuine products from counterfeit products. And there was just so many things going on about like these products, certain brands, certain big brands coming about and saying that there are some people that are producing counterfeit products of our brand. And this is what to look out for when you want to differentiate our real product and versus a counterfeit product. So when I saw that, I wanted to go beyond that and be actually like, are these particular products that have been flagged as counterfeit, now when I do go and probably test them in the lab, are they actually counterfeit? Like, are there things in those products, for example, like an upsurge of heavy metals, that can probably be able to justify the fact that they're counterfeit, or just probably justify the fact that they were developed in very like unsanitary labs, or just having horrible equipment, or just not developed in the right manner, like with their standard protocol and all that. They bypassed protocol, or maybe they were imported having bypassed protocol. So just all those random questions. And also I realized that there are not so many studies that have been done in Kenya about that. And also there are not so many studies that have been done particularly on heavy metals as a cumulative thing, because a lot of studies, maybe you'll find studies done on mercury. There's a lot of studies done about mercury or hydroquinone or all those kinds of compounds, chemical compounds and stuff. But like I looked and when I was doing my literature review, for example, like looking through papers and seeing, okay, where is the gap? Where can I come in? What kind of contribution can I offer to science?
Yeah.
So I saw that, okay, there's not so many studies that have been done in Kenya. There are several, but they're not sufficient enough to be able to tell exactly what the story is on our ground, how exactly it is. So, and that's actually mainly the reasons why I decided, okay, let's just a lot of curiosity, really, just a lot of curiosity of like, how safe are these things? And then now all the campaigns happening on social media, and also like studies that have been done that are not sufficient about Kenya. There's also a study that was done in Kenya about mercury products. It was actually the first thesis that came out of the Institute of Nuclear Science in University of Nairobi. It was about mercury. So I looked at the study and the mercury levels were alarming. So actually I wanted to also see like from then on, because the study was done in the 90s. So I actually also wanted to find out, like, from then, has like any are they better in this era? Because there's so many.
The study was done in the 90s.
Yes, that particular study was done in the 90s.
And just like a follow-up question.
Yes.
Considering they were done in the 90s, were these more of locally prepared products or imported products?
That particular one was a lot of imported for that particular study. By that time, they were not producing a lot of locally manufactured products in terms of mercury, but they were using a lot of like imported skin lightening, bleaching products, especially that. So there was like a huge problem during those times. So then now I wanted to find out, like, has there been any improvement in, like, for example, regulatory elements that may have made that those products are probably now better in terms of like the heavy metal concentration is lower, or like just wanting to find out, okay, so what is the state of these products today?
Yeah.
They was tested in the 90s, these were the results. If I test them in 2025, I might not find the exact products, but I might find something similar, like the skincare products and stuff like that. What is the current status of these similar products today?
Okay, just a curious question. Now, considering you're on your thesis, I'm sure there's data analysis that you do on certain products, right? You're not going to mention names.
Yes.
But just me and you.
Yes.
Are there certain big brands that we know that are breaching the regulations in terms of what should be used in the standard setting of cosmetics or beauty products?
Okay, I won't really go so much into detail about that, but in a short answer, I would say there's some data that I got that was pretty alarming, to say the least. I won't go into details about who, where, like what,
we don't want to know
all
the
that kind of
company
thing.
because of legal
like,
issues.
I got a lot of data that was just pretty like insightful, like trying to find out, okay, so what exactly does this mean? Does it mean that, for example, how they can probably, it's made in, it's a big brand that is international brand, but they were made in some factories in Kenya, like usually say like made in something industrial area Kenya.
Yeah.
So you're trying to find out, is it the problem? Was the problem the is it
Local
really
preparation.
the local preparation that was done for said products, or was the problem like, is it just fair to just slap that, oh, it's these brands
The
that
whole
have this
company,
problem?
yeah.
And then there's also this issue that usually comes with a lot of products that are sent to third world countries that are usually sometimes not so much at par, because also our regulatory systems are a bit lax. The accountability is also a bit wanting for some of these things. So trying to find out like, okay, so I don't, okay, yeah, I can say like for me, I got a lot of data that was quite insightful, because I got some pretty things that I did not see this coming, because honestly speaking, I can say, if I was to put like in a nutshell, the repeat offenders, like I would call it for lack of a better word, repeat offenders, where you think like, oh, skin, not really skin lightening, but like skincare or something else, or you'd probably think that, okay, I can't really go into detail on that. I just remembered. However, this is what I will say. But I will say like the ones that you think
That are
might be
safe or the
safe
best.
are actually
The worst.
not really the worst. I can't really say the worst, but like they have certain level of heavy metal concentration. And then the ones that I'm like, okay, I know this one is going to have something. Then I go and test it. I'm like, this is fair. It's
Okay.
not the best, but this is fair. I expected you to do much worse than what is here. So I got a pretty interesting kind of finding also.
So I'm assuming this was a comparison between some brands of makeup, skincare,
Yeah.
any other cosmetic product,
Yes.
where you're comparing the famous brands to the non-famous brands.
Yes.
If in your research, and there's this is the biggest question I have to ask, because it's something that I
Yeah.
see almost every day in our community, and we're doing a campaign on this, where
Yeah.
trying to teach men and women that there is harmful effects to doing skin whitening. And if you noticed, Isli is an area that is booming with hospitals.
Yeah.
Part of the reasons why we are now asking ourselves is it because of what we put on our skin? Is it the sanitation department that's lacking?
Yeah.
Is it the crowdiness and how much overpopulated the area can be? So putting one onto another, you notice the patients I see in the clinic, majority of them are individuals who have either used
Yeah.
or are currently using or are planning to stop. And moving from that perspective, coming now to your research,
Yeah.
have you tried to move into the markets to assess those
Yeah.
products and see how much is in there? What did you find?
So I actually tested a couple of, not necessarily, okay, yes, you could say skin lightening, but they're not marketed as skin lightening. They're labeled as like skin brightening, or they give names to buffer some of these things. So I can say from those, I can say the findings were also not so good, because, for example, there might be safe. Okay, let me start from this point. When I'm talking about heavy metals, I was testing not all the metals, because you could think of iron, zinc, whatever. But I was limited to 6 heavy metals. I was limited to, just to name them, I was limited to chromium, cobalt, arsenic, mercury, lead, and nickel. Why I chose those metals is because they have a very high tendency to cause carcinogenic properties, or to cause cancer, if you use them, and then the metals accumulate in your body over a long period of time. So now, particularly, like, for example, for some products, for example, like the skin lightening or skin brightening products, or even some lotions and stuff like that, what I was finding is that, for example, a lotion might probably have like the concentration of one particular heavy metal might be a bit low, but then now for another heavy metal, it might be a bit higher. For example, I'd give an example. Sometimes you'd probably test, okay, sometimes I'd test, for example, for something like mercury, for example. So I'd find like the mercury one is a bit fair. However, the lead is very high. And then something like chromium, which is also like a group 1 carcinogen. Group 1 carcinogen basically is like the worst of the worst kind,
triggers to
basically.
cancers.
Yes. So I find, like, for example, it might, for example, be a bit better. No, I can't say better because it's still past the regulatory limits. But like when you compare the level of mercury in the product versus the level of something like chromium or something like lead, it's very, very different, basically. So probably the agents that are in the products that are making the skin lighter, for example, they might not be using mercury. So that's why the mercury is not there. Maybe they're using something else. However, in the process of manufacturing, they also included manufacturing process included other heavy metals that you might probably be testing for this thing, but then it ends up having another set of issues that you didn't even see because it's been accumulating. Things like lead accumulate in the body for a long period of time. And then the effects come way later and you don't even know, like, okay, so when did this happen? When did it start? So I can say, yes, there is a correlation. But for some of the products I was finding, yes, there are others that had very high mercury content. But for some of the products I can say, for example, they did have like so much of high mercury content, but they had a high content of another level of like another kind of heavy metal, which is also very toxic because all these heavy metals I tested for the carcinogenic properties and also non-carcinogenic properties, for things like skin allergies, irritation, reproductive issues, that kind of things, like
Hormonal
the
disorders.
potencies, like the ability for that heavy metal to accumulate in the body and cause these other effects also in general.
Just like a follow-up question on that. You've mentioned assessing cancer risks on certain heavy metals and non-cancerous risks. And non-cancerous risks would be things like hypersensitivity reactions or allergies,
Yes.
hormonal issues. And just to be more explanatory, which of these metals were found to have a higher incidence or trigger hormonal issues and hypersensitivity reactions?
Okay, so particularly I was finding that things like lead, especially, okay, for all of them, for all the metals that I tested, all of them have both carcinogenic and non-carcinogenic properties. It's not like one particular one is only limited to the cancer side and the other one is not limited to the cancer side. But then also it depends with the prevalence that I found for said metals in said products, basically. So depending on the level of metal that I found in that product, it could bring an equal level of carcinogenic risk and non-carcinogenic risk. So for example, and also there's also the element of like the cumulative burden, like the problem being brought by this metal plus this metal plus this metal. For example, there's a product that had like high levels of all 6 heavy metals. So now when you're counting, like for example, the effects from this one and this one and this one and this one and this one, then now you combine all of them together. Then you look at the non-carcinogenic risk of all of them combined. Then you look at the carcinogenic risk, all of them combined. It's pretty alarming, basically. So I could say all of them do have carcinogenic and non-carcinogenic risks altogether.
Interesting. And when we were starting a conversation on the heavy metals, there is an index you mentioned where there is a certain limit of where these metals are allowed, right?
Yeah.
What if they're non-existent? What if the heavy metals are completely obliterated from preparation of such cosmetic products or beauty products? Is there an issue with that?
Okay. So, I can say that some heavy metals are permitted only for a certain, for example, use. It's not like all heavy metals are bad, basically. Like generally, like all this, but however, for some, for example, when it comes to like pigments, like for example, something like chromium, but a certain compound of chromium, like this chromium 3 and this chromium 5, those are two different compounds. So it depends. There's some metals that are permitted or allowed in products to do a certain function. Like for example, chromium is used in colorants and things of that sort. But then now there are products that there are metals that have no use whatsoever being there. Like, why are you here? Things like iron, you could say, okay, iron is a heavy metal, but I didn't test it because it does not have a carcinogenic risk. It has a non-carcinogenic risk, but also at a certain amount, like that's way over. Because also iron has a very important use in the body. So I'm not even looking at that basically. But then now, for example, for lead, it has no use, no purpose in a product regardless. Something like mercury has no use, no purpose. Arsenic, it's not supposed to be there basically. But things like chromium, for example, you could say it's a colorant. Like for example, nail polishes could have chromium. Like the chrome color is basically chromium.
What causes the glittery effect on the nail polishes?
It's chromium actually,
Chromium.
but it's a different compound of chromium, which is chromium 3, which is a safer compound than chromium 5, which is now the carcinogenic.
Okay,
One.
I got you. And moving on from that, we've seen you've broken down the number of metals being 6, being the most, and you've done research on certain sellers or let's say wholesalers or certain companies who are showing that okay, this is beyond where it's needed to be and we are now causing harm and not being beneficial to the consumer. Do you have any idea on what the necessary bodies are supposed to do? Because I think KEBS has a role to play when
Yeah.
it comes to standardizing whatever is being imported or brought into the country. Are they sleeping on their job?
I could say generally that there's a, for lack of a better word, lax on accountability for a lot. I can't really give a accurate representation because I also only sampled a few I didn't sample the entire market, but for what I could test and probably even the literature that I was finding or reading, I could say there's a bit of like a laxness on accountability, not only from, for example, the regulatory bodies that exist locally, but also it depends also on where the product came from, like the ones that are imported or the ones that weren't manufactured in Kenya, you could put it like that. There's a certain level of laxness where I could just feel like, were these things really tested? Or were they just manufactured and then they put a sticker on it and then they put them out in the market and say that, okay, this is safe or something of that sort, because it's just very questionable as to why, for example, I was getting some levels I was getting. So I really wouldn't know whether they're actually sleeping on their job or not. However, what I could find in terms of like my own research, because there are other people who've done their research and they've probably found out, oh, the heavy metal levels, for example, there's a person who's testing lipsticks in Mombasa County. They're like, oh, heavy metal levels are not that high and stuff like that. But then now in terms of like my research with the little I was able to do, it raised questions from like, okay, because regardless of whether they've come imported and stuff, they still have to pass through these bodies. They still have to be tested. Also, number 2, there's also the aspect of expanding their regulatory terms. For example, they only offer, as far as I could find in my research, when it comes to heavy metal concentration in cosmetic products, they could only offer certain levels for arsenic, I think lead, and mercury. Chromium was not listed, cobalt was not listed, nickel was not listed, and so are so many other metals basically were not like listed as far as I could find in my research, basically, as far as the standard that came out from KEBS in 2021. I couldn't find any other metal. There are other regulatory bodies that exist. For example, the EU regulatory body, the FDA in the US and stuff like that. And also the problem that comes also with the international regulatory bodies is in that different bodies have different levels for different metals. So for example, this one is saying 20 ppm is enough for something like lead. And then this one is saying 0.5 is what is enough
for lead.
Then this one, yes. Then this one is coming and saying this one is 1. So there's no so much of like
there's
consensus.
no standardized
yes.
Value that is agreed upon.
There's no
worldwide.
standardized value. The others that are more or less like mercury is 1 ppm everywhere. And others basically, but for some metals, like for example, chromium or lead, some people are saying this, some people are saying this. So it's like, there's no general consensus of like, okay, so what's the best? Because even like with the standards that are given by KEBS, they're not necessarily the lowest, basically. They're somewhere in the middle. They're not so high, but also they're not so low. So it's like, should we have a revision of these standards or these limits? Or those are the questions now we need to also be asking that also come from the research that I'm doing. Like, do we need a revision of these limits? Do we need like a cohesion of like the regulatory bodies and the standards that they've given for these metals? Yeah, just like for a layperson to also know, like, okay, so have you guys decided the same thing?
Yeah.
All that kind of things. So yes.
And in the Kenyan, let's say, community, and specifically of late, there has been a number of drugs that are listed by the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, labeling them as this should not be circulating in the market. So there's a bit of a powerhouse being seen from the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. And some of these drugs are drugs that are imported. So the Pharmacy and Poisons Board cancels such drugs and they no longer hit the market again. My question is, considering that these are things that are being imported, some of them locally made, the ones being imported into the country, do they have the exact, let's say, measurement of the same heavy metals compared to the ones that are originally being used in the country where it was made from? Well, let's use an example. Vaseline. Okay? Just Vaseline. Or petroleum jelly to be safe. Petroleum jelly that is made in the UK has certain number of ingredients. It is now exported to Kenya. The petroleum jelly that is coming to Kenya, will it have the exact compounds and components similar to the one that is in the UK? Or there is like, you know how tea kuna kwanga na grade 1, grade 2, grade 3? Yes, that's my question. You've understood me?
So I did some couple of comparisons of like the same product. For example, now the version that I could do of that is, for example, getting like a genuine product of like a certain brand and then going to, for example, River Road or something like that sort and getting like the counterfeit version. So probably you say like the counterfeit version was just made over here. And then the genuine version, somebody put some effort to probably bring it directly and put it in the market, basically. So for some of them, I could find that, of course, the counterfeit has much higher level of heavy metals than the original. And then I also found that for some of the products, okay, I could say for some that I didn't do like the whole comparison of like, okay, it's the same product, let me get this one from here, let me get this one from here. For some of them, I could find like, for example, the imported brand of a certain, for example, hair treatments, I could find like the imported brand, not for all of it, basically, but like for some particular cases, for example, the imported brand would have like significantly lower levels depending on where it was also manufactured, because different regulatory bodies have different kind of stipulations and stuff like that. So we could find like it has a bit lower. And then the ones that are, for example, locally manufactured, especially the ones that, for example, you'd see are like manufactured on a smaller scale, if I'd put it like that. So maybe somebody had the they just had like this vision of like maybe starting to create cosmetics like in their kitchen or something else. But I'm not really saying it like it's a bad thing really, but like I'm finding like some local manufactured products I don't think were necessarily manufactured in like a huge industry in industrial area. Maybe it's a bit like more localized and stuff and a bit more
Small scale production.
yes, more scale production. I was finding like some of these have a bit of like, I know it's not intentional because also there's another element that I haven't brought in, which is the element about like products that are deemed as like, you know, the natural products and stuff. Also, those ones may need much stricter regulation because for some of the natural products, when you source them directly from the source, you've not really factored into for example, things that are gotten from the earth have a higher heavy metal content. Just because, for example, like bentonite clay or something of that sort. Since they are sourced from the earth, they have somewhat of a higher level of heavy metal content naturally because of where they've come from, basically. Okay. So, like, if there's not so much of like, when you just think, okay, that's why there's a lot of chemistry and a lot of things that need to be involved in making of these products. It's not just like, oh, you put this and you learned to make soaps in a workshop. You came, you started making soaps. I have no problem with them, really. But I'm just like, some of these things also now need a bit more strict regulation because of some of the findings that I found.
Given the chance to be ahead of, like, let's say the nuclear department in Kenya, what would be the first thing you do when it comes to skincare, cosmetics, hair products?
First of all, I think that that's not really so much about the mandate of like the nuclear person. However, I can say that the nuclear facilities also would help in the figuring out of the heavy metal content that is in these products. However, if I was there, if you could put it like that, I don't think the first thing would be just like, oh, flag these things out, ban them. You have to start asking questions first. Because first of all, like, why did they get here? And why are they here, basically? Some of these products are usually manufactured to offer like a cheaper alternative to the pricier brands, because in this economy, who's going to be forking out, God knows, skincare is damn expensive. But who's going to be like getting out so much money to buy skincare when probably they have their basic needs not met? So they'll probably think that, okay, probably this one looks a bit better. Let me try this and stuff like that. So let me just go in this direction. But I think what I think is the first thing that needs to happen is asking questions, number one. Number two, also collaborating with different stakeholders and stuff, because we come from the point of like the standards of the heavy metals that are supposed to be there. That's a whole different conversation. There's also a different conversation of, for example, when I'm calculating now the elements of like the lifetime cancer risk or the non-carcinogenic properties and stuff, some of the parameters that I used in my study, I had to get them from a questionnaire that I did, because some of the fixed factors that exist only exist, for example, for the EU. And they're not, none of this data is there in an African context. For example, like you'd use parameters such as frequency of application of a product, surface area of a body or something like that sort, because if it's a lotion and you're applying it in
high
this
absorption,
yes, you have to say like what's the average weight of, for example, the people that live in this area. So they vary differently from different areas, and the parameters that exist are, for example, parameters that the EU has set, and they don't directly reflect to what is in Kenya. For example, Kenyans don't apply. Okay, there's a whole campaign about sunscreen these days, but like not so many people have caught up on it. We don't apply sunscreen from head to toe. They probably would tend to do that, for example. So just a lot of like figuring out the nitty-gritties before you get even to the point of like, okay, so now we are banning these things and stuff like that. Just a lot of collaboration with people, and also just exactly trying to find out what's exactly the story in Kenya. Like, what's the reflection of, for example, this case on a Kenyan level. We are looking from a toxicology perspective. We are looking from also the heavy metal perspective, like the accurate representation, because for example, what I've done is just very small. So I would want to know, like, on a larger scale, before even get to the point of like now we are banning. Like, what is the actual effect? What are the actual health effects? Like, for example, now from you in a medical perspective, the people that come to the clinics and they report cases of cancer, they report cases of like other medical issues that they have. What's the actual reflection of that on the ground?
Okay. So basically exactly to try and get a linkage between product A
and this
patient outcome of the patient.
Yes.
And then being able to assess now on a national scale.
Yes.
Let's say Embu, Kerugoya, Western products being used. What is the patient profile presenting with, or among those who used such products? That's what you mean, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I think I got you. And I think we're coming to the end. If we had now, with the information that you know about certain products that are on the market already, what would you advise someone who is, let's say, a shopaholic of skincare products? Is there a clue they should look out for in terms of looking at the ingredients when they are buying a product?
I think that's actually a very good question, in as much as it might look very simple, because it's something that I was also looking at in my research, where, again, from the element of comparing, for example, the originals and the counterfeits, and some of the counterfeits that we flagged out of because of the inconsistencies in like labeling. Something has been misspelled wrongly. For example, you get a Vaseline, but it's not Vaseline, it's Vaseina. It's what, it's just off, basically. So I'll probably start by giving a very non-sciencey answer, because science goes with logic, facts, whatever proof. I'd start off by giving a very non-sciencey answer, if I could put it like that, which is like, trust your gut. If you feel like something is
instinct,
yes, something is, because actually that's when we were doing the sampling process, the first base of sampling we did was out of instinct of like, this thing might look like it has problems. Let's pick it out and go test it. This thing might look so. We did like of my data set, almost half of it was the counterfeits, and then the other was real. And then when we were also testing the counterfeits, we found that there was a huge number of the counterfeits that we suspected. The suspected counterfeits, basically, that happened to be okay. So we were actually right about a lot of these things on a lot of metals, basically. So you could say that also with the counterfeits, probably they've already been like, they've caught up with the element of like things like mercury. These ones, because there's so many regulations about mercury and stuff, maybe they've caught up with that, but they've not caught up with these other ones. So we're finding like levels of like 89% of products exceeded counterfeit levels based off of, for example, chromium or cobalt, that kind of thing. So again, I think I'd say like, basically
read
the label,
look for spelling,
look out for any inconsistencies in branding, at least have an idea of what the original might look like. So when you see that, this thing looks a bit dull, I don't think this is actually legit. Or when you open a product and you feel like, oh, it doesn't feel as inconsistent. And then this one has a different perfume or a different fragrance. This one does not. This one has the ingredient labels and stuff like that. I won't really go into the ingredient labels per se, because I'm not so much of a chemist, I could put it. I'm a physicist, I'm a nuclear sciences. And I would also probably even like, again, one of the things I do is collaborate with also chemists and stuff to actually now get the whole level, like the toxicological patterns that come with that. But then just from just a very base level, basically, just be very careful and be very wary, and also looking for like the stickers. Though also with the stickers, depending, it could actually probably not. I'm not really saying that some stickers are just there, but the product is not safe. But also knowing where you're getting your products from, and knowing like some certain manufacturers, again, are prone to stock very sketchy products and stuff like that. So it's a lot of, I know we like to discredit this, not we, I can't say we, but like science will probably sometimes think that it's not logical to, until you've proven, then now it's true. But we actually were able to get to a certain conclusion based off just us starting by intuition. Not really intuition, but just like looking, just very, just being very like, okay, so this one doesn't look like it's okay. Just straight off the bat, it's not okay. I don't think it's fine.
Couple of months back, there was a company, I don't want to mention names, that had to flag off some of their skincare products because of inconsistencies in what was used in such skincare products. And do you think it's something that should be adopted in terms of being honest with the community that you're serving?
Yeah.
And trying to prevent things like birth defects, inability to get pregnant, cancer risks. I think being honest is another part, but pesa pia ni kitu ingine. Pesa drives people. And if there's one last thing you'd like to tell our audience members, what would it be?
I think I'd say that probably just to piggyback off the last point that I made is, again, trust your gut, really, because, okay, I didn't do this whole research to scare people like, I avoid that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But just to come from an element of just
Be inquisitive.
Yes, being very inquisitive and just being very mindful also with the products that you use, and being more or less, don't just do things or do trends or do things for the sake of doing it. Basically, like you say, everybody's doing skincare now, I'm going to buy this brand and this and this, basically just for the sake of it, unless it's targeting a particular concern. I don't think it would be wise to just do things because everybody or some influencer has told you to do something, or has sold a product to you, or has forced you to do, not really forced you, but just like compelled you because it will look better on their brand for them to sell a certain product. I'm just saying this, like, just be your own determinant and be your own
Judge.
Yes, but be your own judge. Don't just do things
Dependent on what other people say.
Yes.
Perfect. We've come to the end of it. I'll ask her behind the camera which brands these are. Comment if you want to know. Just kidding.
Don't put me in the spot.
And Laughing Lab Coat, peace out. Please subscribe, share, comment, and we might do another episode again once you complete your thesis.
Yes, and once I publish.
All the best to defending and making sure it gets you places. And Laughing Lab Coat, peace out.